We want to be the kind of friends who are there for our friends in the midst of suffering. What we'd really like to do is fix it. We'd like to figure out how we can make the suffering stop. But of course, often that is not in our power. And so sometimes what we do is we commit to pray. And this is a really good thing because the things that are not in our power are in God's power. It demonstrates a dependence upon Him to act, to intervene in the suffering of someone else. But I think sometimes we have a very limited vocabulary in terms of what we pray for a friend who is suffering. It can tend to be that the only thing we know how to pray, the only thing that seems appropriate for that friend is to pray that the suffering will go away, that God will take it away. And I don't want to tell you not to pray that way, because I think that's a good way to pray, that God would remove the suffering, lighten the load, restore the relationship, restore health. So it's a very good way to pray. But I would like to say that maybe we wouldn't limit our prayers to that. And the reason I say that is because the Bible is very clear that God intends to use suffering in our lives for His good purposes. And so that should be reflected in the way we pray. If we really believe that God is doing something good in the midst of suffering, wouldn't we want to pray that God would accomplish something good in our friend's suffering? So what difference does that make in the way we pray? So certainly we pray for health to be restored. Pray for relationship to be restored. But we don't limit it to that. So perhaps we think about John 9:3, the story of the man who was born blind, and Jesus healed him. And the disciples ask Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus said, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened that the work of God might be displayed in his life. That actually instructs us on how to pray for someone in the midst of suffering. And that is that we pray that the work of God would be displayed in our friend's life. Now, of course, in that person's life, that blind man, Jesus touched him and he had a miracle. And so sometimes some of us don't get the miracle. But I would suggest to you that for you to have joy, for your friend to have joy in the midst of sorrow, that's a miracle. That's a supernatural work of the Spirit of God in the interior of our lives that becomes evident. To have peace in the midst of chaotic circumstances. To keep on trusting God when doubts are flooding into your mind. That's the work of God, the supernatural work of God, who's giving you faith to trust Him and giving you the spiritual fruit of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness. So we pray that the work of God would be displayed in our lives. I think about James 1, where it talks about various trials, and it says that these are what are going to help us become spiritually mature. Now, all of us want to be spiritually mature, but of course, the way we want that to happen is that we want to go to a conference and take really good notes. We think if we know more, that that's going to make us spiritually mature. But when we read in James 1 about troubles that come and that perseverance leads to hope, we recognize that God's way of making us spiritually mature is to allow difficulties into our lives, to give us the faith we need to persevere, to put our hope and confidence in Him. That's the way He makes us spiritually mature. So instead of only praying for the suffering to be taken away, we pray instead that God would use this to grow us up, to grow those we love up, to make them spiritually mature, that their roots would go down deeper in God and that their lives would flourish. Which reminds me of John 15, where it talks about how God prunes us. Why? In order that we would be fruitful. Well, pruning hurts. If something gets cut away, it hurts, but yet it's purposeful. We know our Father, the Master Gardener. If He's cutting away something in our life, it's purposeful, which is to make us fruitful. Or that makes me think of Hebrews 12, where it talks about hardships, and it says to accept hardships as discipline. And then it gives that so that. It says, so that there might be a harvest of right living. That's what we want in our lives. And this begins to transform not only the way we think about suffering and the way we come alongside those who are suffering, the way we pray for ourselves and for those we love who are suffering. So we don't simply pray that God would take it away. We pray that God would accomplish His good purposes in the lives of those we love, not in spite of the suffering, but uniquely because of the suffering.